Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the December 2024 Executive Committee of the Board of Education Retirement System. Today is Thursday, December 19th, 2024, and the time is 12:40. Please be reminded that the committee meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the BERS YouTube channel. I will now begin the meeting by calling roll. Dr. Maderick?
Frank Cervella for John Maderick.
Thank you, Frank. Donald Nesbitt?
Present.
Gregory Faulkner? Here. Anthony Giordano? Here. And I'm here, Karina Paulin. I also want to...
Kevin Troy, you
Yes.
acknowledge Kevin Troy's presence.
Yes, I'd like to
A
acknowledge...
recently elected alternative trustee who will be empowered to be an official trustee January 1st.
Perfect. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you.
We have quorum. It's at least 3 attend.
Oh yeah, acknowledge that Mr. Dorsey, a representative of the controller, is here.
Just
Thank you.
Just for the record.
Yep. Thank you, Kamika. We have quorum. Now on the agenda is to consider the minutes from the November 14th, 2024 Executive Committee meeting, a summary of which was included in your packet sent prior to the meeting. May I get a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll move down.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Who's taking notes for this? Are you taking notes? We have any questions on the agenda? May I have a motion to consider? No, excuse me. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? Vote to approve the minutes? Any? It should be a vote to approve, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, vote to approve.
Approve.
Any opposition? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The minutes pass. Okay. On agenda 4, we have recommendation for $29 million commitment to the 400 capital ABTF. We need to go to executive session. Okay, let me pull it up. All right.
Something seems a little out of order.
Yep, it is.
You just would give introductory remarks, and then we would go into agenda 4 in executive session with the.
Oh. Okay. Sandy, did you want to give a?
So Leo, I was just gonna give the executive committee members a very, very short review of Chapter 551 and some of the issues that may present. 2 weeks ago, the governor signed legislation which would impact our UFT union represented BERS members. It gave them the option to transfer to TRS, and it provided for future UFT represented employees in certain titles, and there's a lot of detail behind that very short sentence, a lot of detail, but provides for them to be optionally TRS, to join TRS, and prevents them from joining BERS. So if you look at and the Office of the Actuary provided a note to Albany on what the impacts of that legislation will be, and it is in force. But the Office of the Actuary, 18 months ago, estimated that that would be 5,500 members that would move over time from BERS to TRS. And it would take a while for that to occur because transfers are generally a manual process. It could take multiple years for that to occur. And that their estimate is $730 million of defined benefit assets would follow those members from BERS portfolio to the TRS portfolio. In addition to that, our own analysis, which is still being developed, we've only had 2 weeks to work on this, but our own analysis suggests that if those members all move to TRS over the next few years, in addition to the $730 million, which I think you should probably gross up to $800 million because it's been a year and a half since that estimate was made. There's another $525 million of TDA fixed investments made by those members, according to our data, that would also shift from BERS to TRS. It means that our portfolio, which is currently approximately $10 billion, over time could see a $1.2 billion leakage of assets from BERS to TRS. And that could happen over a period of 2 to 3 years. But what this means is that we are currently, if you look at our asset allocation, and it does not change, we are currently at or over the target allocations for alternatives. And that it's quite possible over the next 2 to 3 years, even net of contributions, retiree payments, and investment returns, the portfolio could be shrinking. So rather than this group and the board approved, I believe, a 3% growth assumption, which drives how we estimate pipeline capacity going forward. That 3% may overstate our growth. This is an opinion of mine without sufficient data to support it yet. It could be negative 2%. It could be a 5% shift. Now that's gradual. It's over time, but we are currently 12% allocated to PE. Anash, at a presentation a few days ago, suggested that cash returns from our investments are slower than he anticipated. This is going to be a challenge for us for the next. I will go out on a limb and say, if we approve new private equity allocations in the next 6 to 12 months, we could see our allocations to private equity zoom as a result of a denominator effect as assets move from BERS to TRS. So this is something we have to consider. It's something that BAM, we've only opened up this conversation with BAM in the last week or two. Salil will be working on the analysis on this. Our private markets consultant, Axia, is just getting briefed on this. So there's a lot of thinking and calculating to go into this, but it's something you should be aware of because, if we're currently 10 billion, we could see a $1.2 billion asset shift over the next 2 to 3 years. That's a negative growth in the portfolio in all likelihood. There we go. Yeah, Donald.
Question, in TRS members, the members that's don't they get 8.25? No, it's 7.
They get 7. As UFT members, they get 7% fixed.
So the shift.
So there's no benefit from the state. And what's
right? Yeah, we can't
we have
tell
a
them
sense
that
of-
they're giving up an 8.25% benefit.
Do we have a sense of it is strictly by their own choosing, right?
Correct.
Do we have a sense of what percentage of them will go, what percentage might stay, or is there any benefit for them to stay versus going?
Yeah, the models are actually, it's 5,500 is the impacted population, and the baseline is only those that would see an actual net benefit of switching are assumed to switch. So that's just the baseline assumption from the actuary's office. So it's a subsample of that group. That's all that they can have for now. You can run variations of it, but that's all that's there.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only hard estimate. Well, how do you have a hard estimate? The only mathematical estimate we have is the Office of the Actuaries Analysis, which is about a year and a half old. I can share that fiscal note with anyone who's interested. It's very detailed. Yeah, John.
So respectfully,
Yeah.
I appreciate you raising the issue, and I think it's an important issue. I think it's I think it becomes a broader board issue because the impacts are not just to the pacing plans and other things, what potential impact. It's also to the budgeting of an agency that's budgeted for somewhere around 27,000 people in a population that would now have to budget for 18,000 or whatever the numbers are. Whatever the numbers are as we have auto enrollments and people access. Right. So I think there's broader implications that need to kind of get sorted out with respect to all of that. I also just want to make the point that if I don't believe it's incumbent on the executive committee to make the determination to cease or to slow down the pacing plans without the broader board, because it isn't a decision that I think the full board would need to be aware of if the choice was to either cease or slow down what's already the existing plan. I'll leave it up to other folks to figure out the proper avenue, but I think the discussion's important enough. And in fairness, I live in the pension world, so when legislation gets passed, I hear about it in several different forums. So I'm not closed off from the process, but I recognize that a lot of people are not quote unquote pension professionals or investment professionals that aren't necessarily paying attention to these bills that happen in Albany and how they impact the fund. So I just think in fairness to everybody else who's, I guess I'm trying to speak to the folks that aren't on the executive committee. It may be helpful to have that. And I see Allison's here too. I don't think you're on the executive. You're on the executive, right? No, so you're like I am, right? So I mean, that's just my opinion, is that I think it's a broader conversation.
Actually, Sharon will give a briefing on chapter 551 at the board meeting.
Okay.
But I wanted the executive committee to know this because the decision-making is actually here.
Yeah.
And if they're, I mean.
Yeah, I have no disagreement with telling everybody. I'm just making the point that it's a big, I mean, it's big.
New legislation signed 2 weeks ago by.
Talking about UFT, UFT.
You could see a $1.2 billion decrease in our assets drain in our assets from BERS to TRS over the next 3 to 5 years. That's only for that. I mean, there are other things going on like contributions and retiree payments, et cetera, investment.
I mean, Sandy, would it be possible to get a kind of tangible differences between what the TDA offering of UFT versus BERS is?
It's the only functional difference is the variety of investment alternatives available to the 403B plan.
Difference in payout?
No, UFT members get a 7% fixed TDA return.
And also, though, Antonio, prior to his leaving, and I had a conversation about potential discrepancies between numbers between BERS and TRS. That I would assume would have to be rectified before any of this would go through, right?
Not necessarily. The variable account. So if you look at one of the internal estimates we did was look at, we took the actuary's note, which was a year and a half ago, said that fund flow would be 730 million. We took their estimate of what number of members are. We took that data, identified them in our systems, and we determined that those individuals had $525 million in a fixed fund. And recall that we pool the fixed fund with our DB assets, so they're basically in the same fund pool.
Is there
And we have, and of those people, there's about $100 million in the variable, which is the one equity fund that is available to BERS members that is managed by TRS. And that variable fund is also available to TRS. It would just pop over to their side, their balance sheet.
There's an existing contract between BERS and TRS, correct?
There is no current contract. There is a requirement that we review that contract every 5 years. It's actually never been done. And we have got resistance to TRS in that question. But we have a very long relationship with TRS. We have,
Next door to each other.
we are, yeah.
And it's any of this change mitigated with the auto enrollment and the more members coming on
Yes.
BERS? And
It's-
what's the
It's hard to say. we're
have to
actually
do
at the
some
point where
modeling.
we're taking guesses, right?
Yep.
So, but auto enrollment was immediate, right? So our membership went from about 55 to call it 80.
Mhm.
And this will trail out, according to the OA's estimate, 5,500 over time, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so the impact, in all likelihood,
You what?
well, it could be a wash, or actually the numbers suggest that we'd still have a greater number of members.
Mhm.
But we won't know that for a few years, because the analysis also says that there are 19,000 UFT members in BERS. And because we don't have the details on those titles, we can't tell whether they're all impacted by Chapter 551. But there are 19,000 UFT members that are currently members of BERS in some capacity, either current retiree, vested deferred, currently working, or having worked and separated. I mean, and it's hard to, until we actually have details, and we've requested the details from, we've asked UFT, we've also asked the actuary to give us the background on their data so we can see that. But, the good news on all this is it will take multiple years for this to work out, because transfers are a manual process. It's not automated. And, if we got all 5,000 requests February 1st, and by the way, they can start requesting December 10th, and we haven't seen any yet, right? But if we got all 5,500 on February 1st, it could be 2 years, because we're gonna come to the board for a couple of things. We're gonna ask for increased overtime in the budget, because this will put an immediate impact on the last half of fiscal 2025, and probably request for temps. And we have shelved for now the idea that we would ask for more staff based on the auto enrollment, because we just don't know the effect.
So the last question, and it looks, I think members should have the rights of self-determination. You want to go be where you want to be, that's fine. But I thought the line in the sand had been the actuary, or I think it was Bob North, had made a real line in the sand between the non-pedagogical and the pedagogical as the line between BERS and TRS. And did that line get erased, or
Yeah.
with this? Okay.
They reestablished the line as UFT member. And that's the state's right. The state can do that. This is state education law.
Yeah, listen, people should have the right to self-determination.
So
Us, the decline of assets. Do it just mean that we take down pay?
Yeah.
What is the fiscal impact to the people?
Yeah, I think that's behind my comment. The growth of the portfolio, the assumption being 3%, which drives the pipeline. If the assumption is now -2%, and we are true to our asset allocation targets, the challenge will be, what do we do about our PE exposure? It'll be very difficult to add. It'll be very difficult to add any alts exposure, in my opinion. This is my opinion now. My opinion, not anyone else, mine personally. Hard to add additional alts exposure without violating our asset allocation targets, right? Because the decision you make today, it may not be evident of the problem for 6 to 9 months. You may make a decision today and find in 6 to 9 months, we've made additional PE exposure, and our now PE equity exposure is now 18 or 19%. It's quite possible. It's quite possible. Hard to tell. Might not happen. Equity markets go up 20% this year. We have nothing to worry about, right? So
That's not likely.
what we don't know is what we don't know.
But
Right?
I would say,
But I would argue that there is no risk to your members. No risk. Their benefit is perfectly protected. Remember, we are functionally 100% funded. So,
but we want to stay that way.
and it will be easy to say that way, as the liabilities for those 5,500 people transfer to TRS also, right? And the assets go with them. It's not like, it's not like they're taking assets which are otherwise protecting the liabilities that are backstopped for your members. No,
You said that there's,
you're perfectly protected.
you said there's still some analysis.
I might just
we'll-
want to add that for auto enrollment as well as for the UFT transfer, both of those actual analysis were done as univariable problems. They weren't done sort of in combination with one another. It will not be a wash in the end. However, as Sandy mentioned, it's an estimate of about a year and a half where you're going to see a large initial surge, and then you'll also get the clarity on what the magnitude of the difference is over the long run. So that's part of the initial analysis, and then there's a couple other things about maybe what the trustees would like, if they have any preferences, and if BAM is able to also, and their lawyers find a way in terms of which assets get attributed to which people who transfer and things like that.
You know, I was going to say, I think it's important that we do some modeling of the if-thens, because as you explained, there's so many different variables that have to be under consideration. We should pull them all together and do some modeling so that people have a sense of a comprehensive view of what is possible, what is likely, what we anticipate, and what should we or should we not do in anticipation of the change, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of moving pieces,
Yep.
and it's going to be hard for anybody to understand all these bouncing balls without making sure that something doesn't fall through the crack that we think about. So I think the modeling would be the best way to do it, even as we talk to the full board, so that people can see it with all the potential risks, opportunities, and the ultimate end.
Yep, we're actually, requesting data from UFT and the OA.
Okay.
Yep, that's.
And then are there specific time or timing that we must consider and address with the investments that we're talking about making, and or risks around being too high, being too low, or that sort of thing?
Must is too strong a word. The reason I'm bringing it up is that decisions you make today may not show up as
Thank you.
less than favorable in 6 to 9 months.
Right.
Right. So, and the reason I suggested we may want to consider not making any PE equity investments for the next couple of quarters is that we are already over 12%. Target is 8. If we know within a relative certainty, because Chapter 551 is a certainty that it could happen that we lose $1.2 billion in assets over the next 3 years, I think it has to be considered. I mean, I'm not, I'm just an old investment manager, that's, if I was in your shoes, I'd be thinking about this. And if I was in BAM's shoes, I'd be more than thinking about this. I'd be participating in analysis. And, we've already reached out to BAM to open those communications.
I want to mention Anash has his hand raised, so maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Anash, go ahead.
We can't see him behind the recording button.
All right.
Can I just make a quick comment? Just reacting to what was said in the room. One thing that you may just want to consider is we have now hired Evercore as a broker. They only get paid if they actually transact. And hopefully we'll be talking about a secondary sale shortly today. But just remember in the back of your pocket that we do have an ability to access the secondary markets, specifically for private equity, to sell some of your interests if you wanted to. And I would argue that given private equity has been one of your best performing asset classes with a 13.5% net IRR since inception and more than a 15% net IRR for all the funds you committed to since 2011, there are older and non-strategic funds in your portfolio that could help unlock some liquidity and bring down some of that over allocation. I'm not necessarily suggesting that we need to sell everything or sell a substantial portion, but we could consider accessing the secondary markets, even though you may have to take a discount on your valuations, as a better tool for managing your portfolio than simply staying out and not committing new capital to new funds that are being raised today.
So one of the things, Anash, that there was an email I sent to Steve a couple of days ago which suggested the question of, can we shift our commitments from BERS to TRS in a strip of assets as we go? I mean, it would be better for us to shift those assets to TRS if the underlying LP contracts allow it. That's something we don't have access to because we were never given access to the contract.
That would also require TRS affirmatively wanting to take.
Right.
Which
You'd have to
based on
propose.
their allocations, I think it'd be hard to. It's just hard. I mean, I granted some of us also sit on TRS. It's hard for us to determine what one system will make while we're sitting in another system group, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is a
Question
that is
is
certainly
if
something. I think
we don't
it's
have
something that we don't have any lawyers on from BAM, but you know what I mean. But I think that's a legal question on the way that they structure the accounts on if you could do that. There have been similar instances in other asset classes where other funds have taken on someone else's assets. I could think of a hedge fund exit that required one system to strike a value and put the asset. So if there's in theory something's been done, I just don't know that these are much more specific contracts than those. Yep. My question though, Sandy, was with respect to the liabilities. Do you know, or is there some way to determine, are these, I don't know what the median payout is. Are these on the higher end, or are they meaning that will there be a significant liability shift from one system to the other? And what will that do to the ultimate? We pay out approximately, I think it's anywhere between $15,000 and $16,000 a retiree now is the median.
Yeah.
Does that go down as we lose if we lose 5,500 people, or does it go up? I'm going to guess it might go. I can't imagine it'll stay the same, but it's got to move in some direction.
The note, I would encourage you to read. If you don't have it, I can send you the OA's fiscal note.
I've seen the fiscal one. I just don't recall what they did.
I don't recall either, although my impression after reading it was the contribution effect seems minimal, which suggests that there's really not a dramatic impact.
Yeah, I think that the way that the actuary does it is either the city is paying to X or they're paying to Y, but they're paying, right? It's just a matter of who's getting the actual final transfer.
Is your question because you have T?
The reserve calculation would go up.
I'm asking if they do. I don't know because
they have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, the reserve calculation would be raised to go to TRS. Outside of the 5,500, the initial, the ongoing was assumed to be a one-to-one replacement. If someone leaves, there might be someone new that joins. And so that's what's currently assumed on an ongoing basis after that and at equal salary. So again, that's a baseline assumption that could be changed, but that's where it is right now. So it would be a neutral effect on the marginal liability change.
That's mostly driven by the fact that if you're a full-time UFT employee, prior to December 10th, you were in TRS.
Yes.
And actually, so paras, when they're part-time and they go to full-time, they go to TRS.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So
So
it's like,
that's why I'm asking.
these are generally, you can assume, part-time employees.
Yeah. Okay.
So the impact is going to be noticeable.
I just have one last thing. While we're checking with TRS and checking with the UFT on those numbers, we should also check how many family workers were in TRS, which are local 372 members, because one of the bills family workers out of TRS, and now they can only enroll in BERS as well. So
Is that in the same legislation?
it's not in that legislation. That happened, I believe, a year or so ago.
Okay.
In a piece of legislation.
Okay.
It may have been their automatic enrollment bill where our family workers now can't enroll in TRS. Traditionally, they were in TRS, but now they can only enroll in BERS.
And I would also say, it's going to be important for us to determine what is our best case scenario and communicate that. Because all this is happening and people may not even know and understand. And if there's it's something that's best for us as BERS and our members, we should really make sure that people understand and know.
Yeah, this
That
is just
ultimately
started.
impact the fund.
Yeah, UFT has just started their social outreach. We put some on our social network, some information about it, but we're trying not to be, the reality is it's unlikely 100% of these people will move. They're
Right.
just lethargy, right?
Right.
Especially if you're retired, you're not going to move. If you've been here a long time, you're probably not going to move.
Right.
So, even the estimates are
Okay.
pretty much guesswork. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
if, you know, when we did the solicitation before auto enrollment,
Mhm.
I mean, we got 15% response rates. And it's not atypical that 85% of people who are reached out to make a change in their financial status ignore it. So to be honest, it's hard to tell what's going to happen. And I could be completely wrong. Our portfolio may continue to grow at over 3%, could grow 5%. I could be completely wrong. I'm just identifying what is not necessarily the worst case, but not
get
far
that on
off
tape?
what might be
He said he could be
expected.
completely wrong.
It's a drop.
I am.
It's a drop in the
Write it
bucket.
down, John. I'll sign it. I could be completely wrong.
Don't
Could be
first meeting
completely
with
wrong.
the big cheese.
Okay, so could I take a moment? Are we done with chapter 551 for now?
I'm on 55.
Could I take control of the meeting for like,
Can I just acknowledge, who just, John Maddox came in, Tony Giordano and Greg Faulkner.
and I would like to acknowledge John Meadow. So this was something I was going to do at the board meeting, but that means John would have to stay for the next 2.5 hours. And he's, I don't know, John, I want to give you the option to have lunch and go. You don't want it? No, you want it. You want it. You won't admit it.
He wants
So John has been a member elected trustee within 9 months of my starting, right? Yeah, I was hired by the previous regime of member elected trustees. So John and I have been here for 8.5 years. Holy crap. Yeah, I just got a chill now. I'm getting older. Yeah, I'm getting older. So I would like to read this resolution and give him the option to leave so we don't have to wait for it. Resolution to commend John Maddox for his service to the New York City Board of Education Retirement System. Whereas John Maddox has served as a trustee of the New York City Board of Education Retirement System, and whereas Mr. Maddox has served with dignity and distinction since January 2017, and whereas Mr. Maddox has provided invaluable participation and leadership during his tenure at the Board of Trustees of the New York City Board of Education System, and whereas his current term as employee member of the Board of Trustees will expire in December 2024, and whereas Mr. Maddox's performance as trustee of the New York Board of Education Retirement System exemplifies the highest tradition of public trust and responsibility, and whereas I'm tearing up too. Whereas the New York City Board of Education Retirement System wishes to extend its gratitude and well wishes, now therefore be it resolved that in special recognition of his distinguished service to the New York City Board of Education Retirement System, the Board of Trustees wishes to recognize John Maddox for his commitment to support of and distinguished leadership on the Board of Trustees of New York City Board of Education Retirement System. John, thanks so much for your work.
I'm not gonna go anywhere right
And a special gift we only offer.
Oh, boy. Oh.
So it's something to remember as
I'm
well.
gonna stick around for a while. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I may, John and I started together. That's right. In representing our members, and one thing that
You should do something at the panel.
our predecessor said to us is you can have to sit together with the board of trustees, as they did. And John had
One meeting.
done that since outside of the board meeting, on the phone, text messaging, like making sure and ensuring that we're delivering to our members the best possible product. And so I know John is going on to do bigger things. That's always should be acknowledged, and I thank you very much.
I appreciate the kind words, and I'm only. I know where you're up.
I'll take that.
Is that a promise or a
I
threat?
appreciate it. Both. It's both. Yeah, it's both.
All right. I'm not one fan. Let's hold the meeting on.
Thanks, Fred.
We're moving to executive session. Let's see. Now for agenda number 4, we have a few action items for executive session. Do I have a motion
So
to enter
moved.
into executive session? Can I finish? Tony, stop cutting me off.
Try to move it.
Second.
Did I get it? I don't know. Okay, can we go into executive session, please? Stop the recording.
Yep.